I think the way that we build in this country, we build our homes with mold food, basically. And then we run pipes through the mold food and hope for the best. And then we know now that if you expose mold to EMF, it releases 10 times more mycotoxins. So it's possible somebody could have handled or tolerated a little mold in the basement, and then you put your Wi-Fi down there, and now it's 10 times more toxic in the whole house. So that can be a factor. One common thing that I check for that is genetic that relates to mold is the MTHFR gene. So that's a genetic test of your ability to methylate. You do have to be able to methylate to detoxify mycotoxins and get them out of the body. And this is another one where I don't know if these mutations, the more significant ones, are super common or if it's just my patient population because they're super sick have them. But yeah, a lot of my mold patients have significant MTHFR mutations. And so with those, we do methylated B vitamins that donate methyl groups, and then they can detox and stuff in the system.
Welcome, Dr. Terri. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you here. I would love for you to just share a little bit about who you are and who you help.
Sure. So I am a MD, trained in family medicine, and also board certified in integrative and holistic medicine. And I do mostly functional medicine, which I've been doing for about 25 years. And that evolved into a particular niche called biotoxin illness. So biotoxin is something that a living organism releases that's disease-causing or pathogenic to humans. So things like mold toxicity, Lyme co-infections, those are biotoxin illness. And so now I mostly do mold toxicity and Lyme. And I work in Boulder, Colorado. What else do you want to know?
Awesome. So I would ask too, just like how many people are coming to you because of Lyme versus mold? Do you have like an amount of people that you're seeing or cases that you're seeing, or what's the connection between people who have both maybe?
Yeah. So, I probably get equal numbers of mold and Lyme. And that's probably 80% of my practice between the two. So the relationship between mold and Lyme is really important because if there's mold in the system, the body can't clear the Lyme. So the mold suppresses your immune system, and then the Lyme becomes opportunistic and replicates and activates in the presence of mold. And so for often what I see is somebody maybe had a remote exposure to Lyme when they were little. They lived on the East Coast. They spent a lot of time outside. Never knew they had it, whatever. And then they're in a moldy place, and then the Lyme symptoms also start. They get mold symptoms and they get Lyme symptoms. And so the rule for me and most people that do what I do is that if there's mold in a Lyme case, you always treat the mold first, because a lot of times then the Lyme goes back into dormancy and goes away, and you don't have to even go down the whole Lyme road. So they're real connected. So if I get someone with Lyme, I always test them for mold first. Yeah.
Are there specific symptoms that someone presents with when they have had mold exposure versus Lyme exposure?
Yeah. So mold symptoms are commonly fatigue, brain fog, cognitive dysfunction of all kinds, memory loss, and all kinds of things. And then insomnia and anxiety, sometimes depression, a lot of headaches and migraines, and then unusual neurological presentations that don't really fit into a neurological diagnosis. So like asymmetrical numbness, tingling, weakness, burning sensations, ice pick sensations, crawling sensations, muscle twitches all over, balance issues, sometimes visual stuff. And then there's often an unexplained weight gain or weight loss, like rapid. That's often a tip off. So those are kind of you get GI symptoms too, but those are kind of the defining mold symptoms. And then, so in Lyme, there's also co-infections. And so those will have a whole like separate set of symptomatology. So the bacteria that causes Lyme is called Borrelia. And the symptoms that are sort of more classically Borrelia would be fatigue, brain fog, but then joint pain and achiness and flu-like symptoms, which is kind of like you feel like you're coming down with something, but you don't get a cold. Kind of that low grade fever feeling. So, and more pain syndromes, muscle pain, bone pain, that kind of thing. And then a Bartonella is a co-infection in Lyme, and I'll just mention that one because its symptomatology is really similar to mold. So those two can be hard to kind of tease out clinically sometimes. So also fatigue, brain fog, migraines, insomnia, anxiety, more gut dysfunction, and then a lot of weird neurological symptoms, often nerve pain. So people that have like trigeminal neuralgia or other peripheral neuropathies is often Bartonella, and they often have pain on the bottom of the feet as well. But yeah, those two, they present pretty similar. And luckily, we always treat the mold first. So let's see what happens after that.
Yeah. I was curious, how many people come to you having been misdiagnosed with something else?
Oh, a ton.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's changed a lot over time because this is, now I'm known for doing mold and Lyme. And so now I get a decent amount of patients that just walk in my door and go, I have Lyme, help me, or I have mold, help me. But yeah, the things that it comes in is like, it's all the trash can diagnoses. So I don't really believe in any of them, but like chronic fatigue syndrome, that is a label that says you're chronically tired and we don't know why and we can't help you. So we're going to give you a label and send you on your way. So chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, weird pain syndromes, a lot of the rheumatological disorders, but like when they don't quite fit, like it's a soft call for like things like rheumatoid or MS, or often it's they didn't quite fit the diagnosis, but sort of do. Like a lot of times that is more mold or Lyme masquerading as one of those disorders. Mixed connective tissue disorders is often biotoxin. That's another just, trash can label, or irritable bowel. Your bowel's not happy. There's always a cause for your irritable bowel. It's not like it's a diagnosis, like it's a root cause.
Absolutely. That was one of my biggest symptoms years ago when I was struggling, and the neurological issues were really, really big for me. And my dad actually was diagnosed with Lyme and worked in construction, and I know he was exposed to many, many moldy buildings. And he ended up taking his own life. And right before he did that, he was really struggling. He had really bad neurological issues. His fatigue was so insane. It came after COVID, where all of this kind of was the perfect storm, almost like this priming event. And, he went to doctor, could not figure out what was going on. And, no one still really knows. This is really just my observation, and from what I know. And so I'm curious, like, how many people do you see with mold or Lyme and co infections having suicidal thoughts or neurological issues that bad that once treated that actually disappears? Is that something that you see?
So yes, there's a lot of anxiety and depression and suicidality in mold and Lyme disease. It's common. And the question was, oh yeah, they absolutely go away with treatment. Yeah. Yeah, but in my opinion, mold is a great diagnosis. You can get all the way better. It's not rocket science. I really find people do great. It's to me, it's a very hopeful diagnosis.
I love to hear that.
Yeah, Lyme's trickier.
Okay.
Yeah, mold is not as hard. And yeah, I mean, I always, when somebody comes in really complex, complicated history, been sick for a long time, I always hope the mold test is positive because I know I can get them better pretty quick. But yeah, so that's, to me, not a horrible diet. If you're still living in the house that you got sick in and you have to remediate or find a clean space, then it's not the most fun diagnosis for that part, but
Right.
we'll get better.
Yeah. It opens up such a big can of worms because it's not just like, hey, here's the protocol, take these supplements. It's like, well, why are we getting exposed to this mold in the first place? Was this a previous exposure? Is this a current exposure? And that's, but it is hopeful to know that at least if people can to get to you to at least get the proper diagnosis that mold is playing a role, then it's treatable. And I'm curious, what how long do you see it taking for somebody to heal from mold if they're following your steps?
So that's my least favorite question, but I always get asked it.
Yeah.
It varies so wildly. So, if you're still in the exposure, it's going to be a lot longer because the timeline to get better really starts post exposure. So that's a timeline that's really unpredictable if you're still being exposed. Now, if this is an old exposure, which it often is, it's often an old exposure, then it kind of depends on how easily and quickly you detox. So when you treat mold, you should always feel nothing or better. You should never be feeling worse. You shouldn't be suffering. It's actually bad for the system. If you try to detox more than you can, it mobilizes the toxins to different places. And so with that in mind, you can sort of only go as fast as your body is capable of going. And so I launched like an online mold course to be able to treat patients for mold all over the world. And I do it in two different phases. Phase one, mold detox, is kind of teaching and training the body how to begin detoxing these mycotoxins and other toxins and pull them out in the urine, the stool, and the sweat. And so, for example, if they go through phase one and in 4 or 5 weeks, they've been on full doses of binders and they feel great and they're doing really well. And then I start phase two and they do great on that. It's not going to be that long of a road. I always hate to say it because I feel like it's really discouraging. So I have to preface the amount of time with the fact that you feel better each step of the road, especially if you're no longer being exposed. So 2 weeks into phase one, things will begin to improve. As soon as we layer in phase two, things improve dramatically. Now, might it take 6 months to a year to completely clear the system of all mold, to replete the system and the mitochondria after the mold exposure and the whole thing? Yeah, it probably is going to take 6 months to a year.
Yeah. Is it are you seeing specific like genera of mold being trickier to remove from the body as opposed to others?
No, not really. Not
No.
really. I think certain strains of mold are more pathogenic or disease causing, like some are very intense nerve toxins. Mm-hmm. So like trichothecenes is a class of different mold species that are all nerve toxins. They attack the central nervous system, the peripheral nerves. They've been used as chemical warfare agents. They're really nasty.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a difference in how they present. But no, I haven't found any particular one harder to treat.
Yeah. That's also a sharing, just knowing, depending on what situation someone is in, it's sort of, they're all kind of removed in the same way. So if somebody is presenting with symptoms, they're listening to this and they're thinking, oh my gosh, like I think I have some of these symptoms. What is the very first step that you would take somebody through to begin their journey of healing?
Yeah, so I just test them. I do a urinary mycotoxin test. I have a couple companies that I really like. And if it's positive, then I have them do a test on their home. So if they don't have any suspicion, there's not been any history of leaks or flooding or whatever, we just do an ERMI, a qPCR, which is like a DNA dust sample of the house. And then if that looks bad, then we get an indoor environmental professional out to do some, a full home evaluation and testing. But I start with just testing the human and seeing if that's what it is.
Yeah. Awesome. And then one of the things that I was curious about too is for somebody who might not have a lot of money or a lot of resources. Well, you had mentioned that you have a course. So I'm assuming that that's maybe an affordable way for somebody to get the information that they need to start that journey. Would you agree?
It's half the cost of my initial consult. So normally you'd be meeting with me every 4 weeks. So yeah, it's much more affordable.
Yeah, amazing. And then are there like free tools or other healing modalities that people who might not have the resources that they could be doing to begin
Um,
with?
yeah, so there's a lot of things that help pull out biotoxins. So, infrared sauna, ionic foot bath, detox baths, which are like 6 cups of baking soda and 6 cups of Epsom salts, lymphatic drainage, acupuncture. A lot of these things will help mobilize, and begin to pull mycotoxins out. So, if you do some of the parts of the protocol are expensive, but like the charcoal is one of the main binders that we use. It's not expensive. Bentonite clay is another main binder. That's not expensive. Even if we're doing some cholestyramine, most insurance covers it. You can usually get it kind of affordably. And then some of the rest of the protocol is a bit more pricey.
Yeah. And are there different binders that people should be taking? And are binders alone, what supports somebody with mold? Can you kind of walk us through like what does that really look like to detox mold?
Yeah. So, different binders have a different affinity for different mycotoxins. So we choose the binders based on your urinary mycotoxin results and which strains that you have. And so like trichothecenes is the best binder is activated charcoal. And so what a binder does is you take it and it goes into the GI tract and it pulls out mycotoxins and other toxins from the GI tract into the stool. So it doesn't get absorbed into the body. It just sort of sucks up the stuff the body's been able to get into the GI tract and pull out. So we have this weird way of circulating stuff through our liver from our gut, and often the toxins just get reabsorbed, and this just keeps them from getting reabsorbed and pulls them out. And so you need different binders depending on which strains of mold. But yeah, did I answer how do the binders work?
Yeah, I think that helps. So you're using different binders just depending on what mycotoxin you're finding, and and then also supplemental, getting it out through sweating and maybe lymphatic drainage. And are there other like modalities like that that you're recommending as sort of part of the protocol for your mold patients?
Now, are you talking in general or for if people are really financially strapped?
Just in general.
Okay, yeah. So I've
Maybe we can actually put that into two categories. Like,
sure.
I'd love to know like fully what are all the modalities, and then maybe if someone had to prioritize a couple, because I know that we could go down a big rabbit hole with all the different things.
Yeah. So, I mean, to be honest, like doing a mold protocol, doing the full like thing all the way to the end, it's quite pricey. So I try to have patients do the things that are easy, like if they have an infrared sauna at home or detox baths, or I don't, like things like IV phosphatidylcholine and glutathione really help. They'll pull out a ton of mycotoxin. You'll feel better after each IV, but they're pricey, and you don't need them to get better. You'll get better a little quicker, and so that's some things like that are really nice options, but not necessary if you don't have the means at all. So. Um, yeah, I mean, you can do. I mean, ozone is nice for the Lyme and co-infections if you have accessibility to that. And then, yeah, I try to recommend. I have a whole biotoxin relief guide that I give to patients, but I try to recommend the stuff that is, I'm not adding a whole other financial burden with now you have to go buy these, this red light thing and go do HBOT, and because really, if they can do the protocol, they'll get all the way better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's lots of options. So, it depends. You do see when people are using a lot of these modalities in conjunction with the protocol, it's a quicker turnaround time.
Yeah, often.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, because a lot of The people that get sick from mold are the ones that can't detox it. They can't metabolize it. They can't detoxify it. They can't get it out of the body in the urine, the stool, or the sweat. And so then it just builds up in the body. So I'm sure you've talked about total body burden, like your internal toxic bucket. So the idea is when we're born, we have an internal bucket and it gets full over time with plastics and pesticides and glyphosate and maybe heavy metals and maybe biotoxin from Lyme and maybe spike protein and inflammation from a big couple of COVID hits. And then you live in a moldy place and the mycotoxins, once your bucket overflows, the system crashes. And that's where you get symptomatic. So that's kind of how to me, the whole COVID thing sort of fits in. It takes up a big chunk of the bucket for some people. And so the cool thing about that total body burden concept is that you can pull out any of those things in the bucket and that level comes down. And when it comes down enough that you've got bandwidth again to like have exposures and be in the world and be engaged, like then you got your life back some, right? So ideally we get the bucket as low as possible. So you don't ever have to do this again. but,
Yeah.
but yeah, but I love to pull out the mold regardless of if it was the COVID that tipped them or whatever, because it just always, it's easy to treat and people just do really well.
Yeah. How many of your cases have like mast cell activation syndrome? Like, how does that play into all of this as well? Can you walk through that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So mast cell activation syndrome is, your mast cells are white blood cells and they house your histamine and other inflammatory intermediaries. And you sort of get like a whole body dump of your mast cells at once, which then looks like flushing, swelling, hives. A lot of times it's after you eat, but it's not necessarily dependent on what you're eating. It just is the act of eating. Some of those people will find low histamine diets are better. And then it's triggered by untreated infections. So it's often triggered by mold or yeast, and it's often triggered by Lyme and Lyme co-infections. And the system gets so inflamed. You can imagine if you've got so his histamine makes all of our vessels leaky and permeable so that the white cells can get out and fight the bugs and things like that. So, the brain doesn't work well when there's a lot of histamine. You've got a leaky blood-brain barrier. You feel foggy. So some of the other symptoms of MCAS I see is also brain fog and elevated heart rate right after eating. But because of all the inflammation and histamine in the system, they tend to be more sensitive. And so a lot of times they'll have adverse reactions to everything you try to give them. You just won't tolerate anything. And so we often have, even though maybe mold is the root cause of the MCAS, we still sometimes have to treat the MCAS first so that the body is strong enough to tolerate treating the mold. Yeah, and that's just a lot of antihistamines, mast cell stabilizers, natural and over-the-counter and pharmaceutical and compounded. A lot of all that. It's a bummer of a diagnosis, the MCAS, because often people can't eat that many foods, and it's always my goal to get them eating as many different foods as possible and being really able to live a normal life and not, live in fear of mold or live in a tent or anything like that.
Right. Yeah. It's a real struggle with the MS because people can't just start doing the protocol. They can barely sometimes tolerate those supplements that they need to. So it's great to hear that you're treating that first and, recognizing that as problematic in people.
Yeah.
What has been like the most surprising thing that you've learned from doing this work? And I'm also kind of curious to go back. We didn't talk about this when I was introducing you, but how did you get into this? Like, do you have a personal story that got you into mold specifically?
Yeah, of course I do. We all do, I think.
Yeah.
So I was doing functional medicine, loving it, having great results. I found about 80% of my patients would get better with the regular functional medicine interventions. You get them sleeping, you heal the gut, optimize nutrients, all that kind of stuff. And then some 15% of my patients just wouldn't budge at all. Nothing I did made them any better. And they all turned out at the time to have Lyme, or Lyme co-infections. And so I ended up kind of diving into that world a bit, from just the 15% doesn't get better at all. And then you figure out that they have Lyme, and then you start treating the Lyme, and then they get better. And so that kind of brought me into the Lyme world. And then my son was 8 years old. He was one of those really thrill-seeking maniac boys that tried to, jump off of things and hurt himself and go full speed and not eat. And he started limping out of nowhere, and he would sort of deny it. I'd go, Kai, do your knees hurt? Because he'd be walking down the stairs sideways, and he would go, nope. And then he'd turn forward and walk normal. But when nobody was looking, he was limping, and he was stiff. Like he'd get out of a car ride and be all stiff in the mornings. And then he got anxiety, which he'd never had, which was not at all like his personality. And then he was scrappy, underweight, 8-year-old, and he put on 30 pounds in like 6 weeks. Yeah. And the poor thing, it just felt so uncomfortable in his body. It was, awful. Anyway, so ended up finding out he had Lyme. Tried to treat him myself. Don't ever try to treat your own child for Lyme. It's not a smart idea. So I ended up taking him to some really great Lyme docs. We ended up with Dr. Stephen Harris in California, and he gave us a mold test. And so we did this urinary mycotoxin test on Kai, and it was really high. So then at that point, we knew something else was going on, and we got an indoor environmental professional out. And it was the year of the Boulder flood where our whole block had flooded, and we thought we were okay. And that turns out, so under our house was under the entire house was this huge crawl space, but the water was all under the vapor barrier. And so the guy came and cut it, and there was 3 feet of water under the whole house, and all the airborne spore traps were in the red. It was like bad. And so then we put him on, sort of phase 1 mold detox binders and liposomal glutathione, organ detox support. And then we sold the house, we mediated it, sold the house. The marriage didn't make it out, unfortunately. But when I got Kai out of the house and then started him on phase 2 with antifungals, he got better pretty quickly.
Wow.
Yeah, but it had been before that. I guess I didn't describe how bad it got. He was bedridden for 6 months with 9 out of 10 pain in his hip that I know at 8 years old. It was awful. And so, it was brutal. And then he got better pretty quick. Kids get better quicker.
Yeah.
They generally tend to, it wasn't all that long. And then, he's, doing marathons, and he's a chemical engineering student at CU, and he's no remaining anything. He's doing great.
Wow. That's amazing. You touched on it, what people go through, like the emotional turmoil and the relationships that can tear apart, and the emotional and mental fatigue. I'm curious, do you see that a lot, where one person in the home is really sick and then one person is not? And how, I don't know, how do you approach that with clients?
Yeah, you just have to get real with the patients. It's the most common that only one person in a household gets sick. And sometimes it's 2 out of 4, but sometimes it's just 1. And so it's really easy to feel like, how could it possibly be the house? We're all fine. But it's really only a quarter of the population that is sensitive. And I think that percentage is changing. I think for a variety of reasons. I think the way that we build in this country, we build our homes with mold food, basically. And then we run pipes through the mold food and hope for the best. Mm-hmm. And then we know now that if you expose mold to EMF, it releases 10 times more mycotoxins. Mm-hmm. So it's possible somebody could have handled or tolerated a little mold in the basement, and then you put your Wi-Fi down there, and now it's 10 times more toxic in the whole house. Yeah. So that can be a factor. And then I just think our buckets are fuller, and there's less bandwidth and tolerance for more exposures to things.
Yeah.
And I also totally admit that this is my field and it walks in my door every day. So I probably have a distorted sense,
Mhm.
I think it's everywhere. Everyone's got it,
Yeah.
but it's also just what shows up for me. So.
Yeah. Well, you're actually seeing what's showing up on the tests. I'm seeing it in the environment when people are, sharing photos and I see what is actually happening, and especially even in new construction.
Yeah.
We're building tighter than ever, which I think is important because more moisture travels through air than through vapor in our walls. But we're not ventilating our homes properly at all to meet that demand. And again, yeah, we're using really cheap materials that are not withstanding the test of time. And yeah. So just kind of touching back on what you just said, though. So when you see that one person is, experiencing symptoms, is it that, total body burden, you think, or are you saying it's because they're genetically predispositioned? Because earlier we talked about, you're seeing that no matter what the genetics, people are getting impacted by this. So are you seeing a common theme between those experiencing symptoms in one household and those who are not?
So I think that there are genetic factors because I think it's clearly some people can detox it and they're fine, and some people can't, and then it builds up in the body. I don't think we have. I think we're at the beginnings of understanding some of the genetics. I don't know if you've heard out, but Shoemaker came out with the Genie test, which is genetic, and I played with it some. I haven't found it to be totally clinically helpful yet. It's a little pricey. Bob Miller also has a genetic thing, that is can show some, genetic deficiencies in your ability to detoxify mold and get it out of the body.
Yeah.
Again, it's also kind of expensive, and I think it's still in the beginning stages. But yeah, I think we'll learn more over time why it would take one person down. And I think it can be a lot of those factors, like did they have a remote exposure to Lyme? Did they have other things in their bucket? Or was it just that they can't detox it? I mean, I really think, yeah, I mean, I think I can't teach. I mean, I can now because I've taught my body how to do it, but I don't think that I was a person that could naturally.
Mm. Yeah. So, I mean, when I was going to ask, are there genetic tests that someone can take if they wanted to know their predisposition? But it sounds like, either way, though, you'd still start with just doing the detox if you're presenting with symptoms because it's extra money.
Yeah, the mycotoxin test, I would just start there. I mean, I think you might be referring to the HLA-DR, and that's something that we used years ago to try to determine if people are susceptible to mold or Lyme or both. And I think after doing it for 15 years, many of us haven't found it to be terribly useful. Like we find that a lot of people that are most sick don't have any of the genes, and a lot of the people that are not sick in their family have the dreaded genes, and it just doesn't seem to make a difference
Okay.
clinically. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Are there other genetic predispositions that you were talking about earlier?
Well, there's a lot of detoxification enzymes and things that you can have genetic SNPs in, and that's like, so the Genie looks at some of the, well, the Genie's actually more transcriptomics, which is expression of the genes, and then the Bob Miller test is more like the SNPs and your ability to detoxify. One common thing that I check for that is genetic that relates to mold is the MTHFR gene. So that's a genetic test of your ability to methylate. You do have to be able to methylate to detoxify mycotoxins and get them out of the body. And this is another one where I don't know if these mutations, the more significant ones, are super common or if it's just my patient population because they're super sick have them. But yeah, a lot of my mold patients have significant MTHFR mutations. And so with those, we do methylated B vitamins that donate methyl groups, and then they can detox the stuff in that.
That's what I was going to ask. Can you walk us through a little bit more what like methylation means?
Exactly. Yeah. It's always an interesting one. So methylation is part of your detoxification process. It is not the most important step of detox. It's one of 8, 9, 10 steps, depending on kind of how you look at it. But people with methylation mutations, if they're significant ones, are more at risk for fatigue, anxiety, insomnia, and depression. I see a lot of that in clinic, so I draw them all the time. And so the regular like LabCorp Quest MTHFR test looks at two genes. There's an A gene and a C gene. You have two copies of both. And so depending on your SNPs or mutations, you have a different requirement for methylated Bs in order to maintain optimum health, because you'll be at a deficiency to methylate. And so for example, everything that has to come in from the outside world has to get methylated to get out of the body in the urine, the stool, and the sweat. Our own hormones and neurotransmitters have to get methylated to get out of the body. So you can think of the example of like your cortisol and your adrenaline are supposed to be kind of high in the morning and go down to zero before bed. And in order to get them out of your system, they have to get methylated and get out in the urine, the stool, and the sweat. So if you have an inability to methylate, then that stuff stays around all night. And then it's there in the morning, and then you make more of it. And you can totally see how the, insomnia and anxiety and depression and all that kind of come after that. But it's really easy to mitigate for. You just do methylated B complex.
Oh, wow.
And depending on which mutation, you do more of them, and
Okay. Would you say that like those genetics are some of the biggest things holding people back from healing from these things, or what would you say is like the biggest thing that holds people back when they're trying to heal?
Okay, so the first part of that question is no, I don't find this is a huge part of the puzzle. I find that MTHFR is a small part. It's there, but it's not the crux of the matter. And then the second part of your question is what surprised?
I was wondering what was holding people, like the biggest thing you see holding people back when they're trying to heal.
Yeah, so that's a really great question, because there's a lot of common pitfalls out there that people do and then make themselves more sick, and then they think they can't get better and they sort of give up because the Western medical establishment can't help them, and then they tried some things, they got worse, they just kind of give up. So the things that people often will do that will make them more sick is going too much too fast. So you have to respect your body's ability to pull and detox these things, and your body will get better and better and better and better and quicker at it, but you have to sort of respect the boundary at first. And then the order of things is really important. So I can give the example of, so if you start someone on an antifungal and they're sick and you haven't started them on phase 1 and taught the body how to pull this stuff out or anything yet. So if you've got colonized mold in your system, meaning mold living in you, so upper respiratory tract or GI tract, most commonly in the sinuses, if you add an antifungal, you will kill that mold living in the system. And when you kill it, it releases more mycotoxins, its contents. And so there you go. You just flooded the system even more. And you just made the patient 10 times more sick because this body was not ready for more mycotoxins. You hadn't even lowered that burden down at all. And so the order of things is really important, and the pace. And making sure that as you increase binders and layer in new things, that you're always feeling either nothing or better. And so, yeah, as people often, and if you go online and there's a whole surviving mold website, and I've had so many people who go, I took 4 packets of cholestyramine a day for like a week, and then it was suicidal. I didn't get out of bed for 6 months. I was like, oh my God, who would ever tell you to take 4 packets of cholestyramine? So it's usually just that. They go too hard, too fast. They're not honoring and listening. They're impatient, or they go the wrong order.
Yeah, that's really good advice, because I think as a society, like if we don't feel the pain, like there's no gain. Like it's just like that's what society has been trained to do.
And it's true in Lyme a lot. Like if you do everything right in Lyme, it should be minimal herxing. But so in the Lyme biotoxin world, they hear all about the herxing. So they think it's good on some level. Like,
yeah.
And it's not really true for mold. It's you shouldn't feel worse.
Yeah. I'm curious, what would somebody need to do for nasal colonization, sinuses?
Part of the phase one mold detox is a nasal spray. So I use, and the main reason is because the most common place of it living in your body is in the sinuses. Your sinuses don't have any blood flow, so it's hard to get any agents in there, killing agents, antibiotics or anything. And so the nasal spray is trying to just get a little antifungal and something for biofilm straight into the sinuses. And so it just, getting something right there to where it likely is. And I do a compounded nasal spray called BEI. It's got itraconazole and EDTA for the biofilm. And I start with that one, and then depending on how long they're on nasal sprays, I'll switch them to other stuff as well.
What about X Clear?
I like X Clear.
You do?
Yeah, it's in the rhythm of things that I do. I usually start with the hardcore one first if they can, afford it and swing it. But I like X Clear. They've got that new one too with the EDTA in it.
Oh, okay. What's that?
So the EDTA breaks open the biofilm. Do you know what biofilm is?
I was going to ask, I do, but I would love for you to walk us through what biofilms are and how they play a role just in general when it comes to mold.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm just going to use the analogy of like mold colonization in the body. So imagine you're sleeping somewhere that has mold, and it's a humid day or night. And so the mold is sporulating and it's up in the air that we're breathing. And we breathe a mold spore eventually into our sinuses or swallow one down our esophagus, and it can stick and replicate and create families and communities, and then they aggregate together and they form a colony, and then they secrete this glycoprotein matrix around their colony that protects them from your immune system. Your immune system can't see past the biofilm, and from antifungal agents, whether they're herbal or pharmaceutical, they can't get past the biofilm. And so it's like the house that protects them, kind of. And so eventually you have to open up the biofilm to get rid of all the mold. However, if you open up biofilm in the beginning, that's another example of, you flood the system with a ton of the same thing that just made you sick. So you have to do it. It happens last. Mm-hmm. And when you add it in at the right time, it feels great in the system, not worse. Yeah.
Yeah, like biofilm busters. So
yeah,
I'm trying to think of the herb that I was drinking that was for biofilms. Oh my gosh, it's escaping me right now. What are some good herbs?
Like biocidin? Is that what you're thinking of?
No, well, biocidin is one, but it was actually just an herb. I can't remember.
I think it's like, I don't like patients to take things that open up biofilm like randomly without knowing like what biofilm am I targeting. So yeast and mold has that like kind of a harder biofilm. Bacteria has kind of a slimy biofilm. Like they're all a little different. And our good bacteria colonized in our microbiome, they have biofilm. And if we break open their biofilm, they may not continue to be permanently colonized. So I use biofilm stuff really, targeted and carefully.
Oh, interesting. So what you're saying is the biofilm busting herbs, like drinking a tea, like an herb that can help with biofilms, could also be damaging good
biofilms. So I think people have the perception of biofilms bad. Mm-hmm. Biofilm. Do we want that biofilm? We want that happy colonization in our microbiome and, our oral microbiome and everywhere. So, it's not like we should just open up all biofilms,
Well, I thought we were supposed to. So this is great that we're having this conversation.
And also, if you're opening up a film of something you're targeting, you want to make sure you have an agent to kill the thing that you're releasing. So, for example, you wouldn't open up mold biofilm until you had antifungals on board. You wouldn't open up any Lyme biofilm until you had antimicrobials, whether they're herbal or whatever, for the thing that you're, opening.
Yeah, absolutely. This is why it's so important to work with somebody, because I think in today's world, we can get so much health information from Instagram, and now we have ChatGPT. I was actually just with a bunch of health practitioners this past week who were saying, clients are coming in, diagnosing themselves on ChatGPT and doing the wrong things because of it, because it's not quite accurate. And a little off topic, but I'm curious, are you seeing some of that in your practice as well?
Oh, yeah. I kind of always have. I feel like I have a pretty like well-educated population about health stuff. Like there are people that read a lot and, do that sort of thing. So, I mean, it's always a little like tricky, like when somebody, like they'll go, well, then my BART flared and then my EBV symptoms came out. And I have to be like, all right, well, tell me what you're calling your BART symptoms and your EBV symptoms so that I can help diagnose you without you just thinking the cause of those different symptoms, which you might, but you might have no, idea either.
Yeah. I can relate to that. I feel like in this world, the people who come to me, and it sounds like the people who are finding you too, are really well researched because they don't get to us without having done a ton of research, having gone down a really long path. All of my clients are super well researched and very knowledgeable. And so, yeah, but it can be hard because sometimes there might just be one little missing piece that can change it all that they didn't, you just don't know what you don't know. Right. So,
Yeah, exactly. And Chat GPT is awesome, but yeah, it's also can be tricky.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just curious, you know, in healthcare, are you hopeful? Are you seeing changes in medicine as it relates? Are you seeing an increase in awareness on mold? Like what do you see happening for our future as it relates to this topic?
Great question. I'm hopeful, I think, because I'm a hopeful person.
I love
But I do think like the amount of research on mycotoxins in the medical literature is enormous, and it's really sort of undeniable. So I do really hope and think that we will gain a lot more awareness around mold and around how we build and how to treat mold, and more rights for people whose builders built poorly and then they have 4 leaks on the first year they live there, and renters and all of that. I'm on the medical board of Change the Air Foundation, which is a organization dedicated to try to get some laws around all this stuff so we have some recourse. So I mean, I am hopeful, and I so far, I don't feel quite the same backlash from the Western medical community as I do with Lyme. So for whatever reason that people are like, there's no such thing, there's no such thing as chronic Lyme, and there's like, I don't know why they're like that, but I don't feel that same intensity from the Western medical community of denial.
Interesting.
So I'm hoping eventually it'll get sort of integrated because
Yeah.
it's kind of hard to deny. It's there's a lot of research on
Yeah.
mycotoxins.
There are. There
Yeah,
are. What are your thoughts on bee venom therapy? That's just popping in my head.
that's cute.
Yeah.
Bee venom therapy falls into one of those this category for me of things that like have helped a few.
Mm,
Um, not terribly curative. I mean, I've had a lot of patients go do it. I don't think it's ever done anything like permanent or magical.
okay. Yeah. I just remember that being, a really hot topic, years ago when I was kind of diving into this world and I wasn't really sure how that impacted, especially with like histamine responses or things like that. I'm not really sure how it works. So
Not exactly sure how it works either.
yeah. And
There's
then,
there's a lot of other things like that out there that they may not be curative, but like they bring the floor up.
hmm,
Like I feel like if people do a bunch of IV ozone and they have a lot of Lyme and co-infections, it's not going to cure them forever, but their whole system will get a boost and they'll feel better, and then they can kind of do more and get further along and get better quicker. And HBOT is like that. Like there's a lot of things that sort of can boost the system, I guess.
yeah, yeah, it's a lot of feels like just chipping away at the ice block of like one little thing to get you like better and just yeah, it feels like it just complex and sometimes things that work for some people don't work for other people. Do you see that? Feel that?
Yeah, I mean everybody's real different. I haven't been able to find. I haven't. I've never not been able to find a replacement thing though that works as well. Almost never. Yeah.
Yeah.
Binders and tend to be really well tolerated.
Yeah, that's really encouraging to hear.
Just kind of
um,
up slow.
and sort of like in closing, I know a lot of the things that we're talking about here can be scary or overwhelming for people, especially if they're just hearing this for the first time and thinking, oh my gosh, like I have some of these symptoms, is this me? And starting to go down this rabbit hole. What are some words of encouragement that you can provide for anyone listening who might be feeling overwhelmed?
Yeah, so I really feel like if it's mold, you should have tons of hope. Like you can absolutely get better. It is not a horrible diagnosis. It's not, you know, certainly not fatal or anything like that. But it's totally treatable. And for many people, it's a previous exposure. So it's not like the whole part of having to find a new home. And for me, when people have been chronically ill for a long time with a lot of different symptoms and with anxiety and depression with it as well, they just want an answer. Like they need an answer, and then they can start moving to get back to their health again. And people get their life back from mold all the time. It's totally doable.
Yeah, I love that. And so one thing I like to do to tie all of my guests together is really just ask, through doing this work and obviously your experience with your son and your own home and your partnership and all of this that's led you here today, how has that shifted who you are and how you show up in the world?
Yeah, I mean, in every way, really. I've had 3 massive mold exposures. I got really, really sick. Um, and so, I mean, there's so many interesting parts I could touch on one. If you're a mom, don't just treat your kid, treat yourself too. Don't wait 3 years. I waited 2 years and had migraines every day. And the first dose of an antifungal I took, they went away, and I could not believe I waited so long. But you focus on your kid when you're a mom. So like, don't do that.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a process of like at first like getting out of the exposure and getting yourself healthy again, and then it's learning tolerance and resiliency, and trusting really that you're okay and that you're never going to get that sick again. Like what I always tell my patients is when they get better is you're never going to get as sick as you were, because one, your body knows how to do this now. It's practiced. You have to go so slow in the beginning. You can just start everything. You know exactly what to take. And then, you've got me, and then you've even probably got a remediator or inspector or somebody so that if, there's a water issue, you just take care of it really quick. You don't panic. And, that is the whole limbic retraining piece in there. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it is then just getting over the panic, because there's mold, there's water intrusion, like it's going to happen again. But it doesn't mean we're going to get, our lives aren't going to get totally upended.
Yeah. Can you quickly just touch on that limbic piece again? Because that I think is a missing piece if people aren't focusing on that as well.
I guess the underlying thing of all this is the body won't heal if it doesn't feel safe. And if your home has poisoned you unknowingly, slowly, you may not feel safe, right? And so you're not going to be able to get 100% better until you train your system to feel safe again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a big part of what I share with people who are, building brand new homes. And if you don't feel that safety in your body, even if the home doesn't have any issues, there's still that sense of fear that needs to be resolved internally before you can even feel safe in the home. So it's not the home's job to provide the safety. The home's job is to be minimized, to minimize the risk, to, be free of the toxins, but the safety comes from within. And so I think that's beautiful that you're, working on that aspect with clients and helping support in that piece as well, because it's so traumatic.
It is. And if patients like can't progress because they get symptomatic, then we pull that in first. Like that's a big one if they're not able to progress in the protocol.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing today. It's been an honor to talk with you. And I would just love to know, how can people find you? What do you have to offer people who might be looking for support, any resources? And I'll make sure to share any of these in the show notes with anyone so that they can contact you and get your resources.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my mold course is drfoxmedicaldetective.com. And then my clinic is boulderholistic.com. And then I have a biotoxin relief guide that I could give for free to your clients if you wanted. Yeah. And then we could also do a discount on the course if you want to for your clients. And then
Amazing.
we just created this whole mold quiz that like took us forever.
Oh,
I will send you that link. So there's their quiz, like, yeah.
so is the quiz is good for anybody who's trying to determine maybe if
Whole gamut of like, I don't know if I have mold, but I've got some of those weird symptoms. So I know I have mold and I have failed treating it. And I'm like, want to give up or I want to figure it out or the whole gamut. Yeah.
Oh, that is amazing. We'll definitely link that in the show notes. So if you're feeling like any of these symptoms are resonating, take the mold quiz. That'll be a really helpful first step. Well, amazing. Thank you so, so, so much. It's been an honor and I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the work you're doing.
Thanks so much for tuning into today's podcast. We have one more thing before you go. We are giving away one spot into our Conscious Construction Container program, which is our signature program that helps you build and renovate your home from the ground up to reduce your exposure to mold, chemicals, and electromagnetic radiation. And even if you're not building a home, we've had a lot of students who have gone through the program who are not building a home, who have found immense value in going through the program because now they understand how their homes work and they're able to spot issues in homes that they're looking at, potentially to buy. And they just understand how to make their own home healthier through understanding these basic principles. All you have to do to enter to win is to listen to one episode of the Awakening Spaces podcast and subscribe and follow the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify podcast. And we'll give you 2 entries if you do it on both platforms. Comment on the Instagram post that we have linked below and tag a friend who you think would love this podcast or could benefit from the podcast. And every tag is another entry. I just want to say thank you so, so, so much for being here, for listening, and for leaving a rating and review, because this is going to help us get better guests onto the podcast in the future to provide you with more value. So we really, really do appreciate every star, every like, every comments and every subscribe that you can give us, because it really does help us bring you more value in the future. So thanks again for being here, and we'll see you on the next episode.